The phrase Judeo Christian has become one of the most recognizable expressions in modern Western politics, culture, and history. Depending on who uses it, it can describe a shared moral tradition, a common civilizational heritage, or the historical relationship between Judaism and Christianity. Over time, it has grown beyond theology and become a cultural identity that emphasizes continuity between these two faiths. Now, I won't go too deep into the history of this term, as it does indeed carry significant theological and political baggage with a whole lot of hypocrisy in between, so maybe I'll save it for another video down the line. But what happens when we introduce Islam into this conversation? From an Islamic perspective, the idea of continuity doesn't simply follow the Judeo-Christian tradition. It expands it into something much larger. Islam teaches that the message given to the prophets of antiquity was never a series of different religions. It was always the same faith, revealed repeatedly to humanity through different circumstances, languages, and communities. In other words, Islam doesn't simply present itself as the third chapter in a sequence. It teaches that every genuine prophet before the Prophet Muhammad was already calling people to Islam in its literal sense: submission to God. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam therefore become connected parts of one continuous sacred story, rather than three unrelated religious traditions. They're all Islam. Now, I get it, that might sound blasphemous to some, but this perspective creates one of the most fascinating and crucial understandings in world religion. It invites us to see thousands of years of history not as disconnected episodes, but as one unfolding narrative within a single divine source. At the heart of Islam lies an incredibly simple proposition: there's only one God. And throughout history, he has consistently communicated one essential message to humanity. That message has never changed in its foundation: worship God alone, live with justice, compassion, honesty, and humility, care for your family and community, be accountable for your actions, prepare for the life to come. Islam acknowledges and teaches that these principles weren't introduced for the first time in 7th century Arabia. They're understood to be as old as humanity itself. Different societies lived in different circumstances. Some required specific legal rulings suited to their time. Communities subsequently developed unique customs, languages, and social structures. Divine law could therefore vary in its practical details while preserving the same spiritual foundation. This distinction is quite important. Islam separates timeless belief from historical application. Viewed through this lens, human history becomes a long conversation between God and humanity. Every revelation reminds people of the same essential truths whenever they've become forgotten, neglected, or misunderstood. Rather than introducing a new understanding of God, Islam teaches that it continuously calls people back to the original message that has always existed. One of the most remarkable aspects of Islam is the number of familiar biblical figures who appear throughout the Quran. Adam begins the human story. Noah preserves through rejection. Abraham becomes the model of unwavering faith. Moses leads his people through immense hardship. David rules with justice. Solomon combines wisdom with leadership. John prepares the way for righteousness. Jesus performs miracles and calls people back to sincere worship of God. These individuals aren't viewed as belonging exclusively to Judaism or Christianity. Their stories teach recurring universal themes of patience, trust, mercy, justice, forgiveness, and moral courage. Each prophet builds upon those who came before while preparing humanity for those who would follow. Rather than competing religious heroes, they become members of one spiritual family. Please check out our new course on how to navigate Arab identity in today's world, how to define and pinpoint yourself within the various tensions found in the duality of tradition and modernity, the foundations that make us unique, even our contradictions. Unapologetically Arab is a 13-chapter course intent on helping anyone interested in appreciating what it means to be an Arab. Join now by clicking on the link in the video description at either Thinkific or Patreon and begin your empowering journey of Arab discovery. Islam also recognized that God revealed scripture long before the Quran. The Torah given to Moses, the Psalms associated with David, and the Gospel revealed to Jesus are all acknowledged as genuine revelations from the same divine source. While Islam teaches that the Quran serves as the final preserved revelation, it still recognizes these earlier scriptures as important parts of sacred history. This shared scriptural foundation naturally produces shared historical events and thus stories. The creation of humanity, the story of Noah and the flood, Abraham's journey of faith, Joseph's rise in Egypt, Moses confronting Pharaoh, David's kingdom, Solomon's achievements, the birth of Jesus, and the expectation of the Day of Judgment all appear within the Quran. Sometimes the details may differ from biblical accounts. Sometimes additional lessons are emphasized, yet the overall narrative remains deeply familiar. These stories aren't presented as isolated episodes. They form one continuous narrative illustrating humanity's relationship with God across generations. And nothing is as powerful as stories that are told and retold and retold. And for Muslims, reading about Moses or Jesus isn't reading someone else's religious history. It's reading part of Islam's own sacred memory. Imagine that, sharing the same stories across faiths that move the emotions and mind, resulting in an extraordinary overlap connecting billions of people through a shared collection of personalities, places, and defining moments. Now, with all these similarities and overlaps with the other Abrahamic faiths, comes arguments that Islam has appropriated Judaism and Christianity by claiming their prophets, scriptures, and sacred history as its own. From an Islamic perspective, however, this isn't viewed as an act of appropriation, but by full intention and honesty, put forth as a state of continuity. I would even go further and say to the contrary, that Islam reaffirms the original divine validity of the earlier revelations and honors their prophets as genuine messengers of God. Rather than denying their significance, it embraces them as authentic chapters within one continuous revelation. The Arabic word Islam itself means submission to God. In that sense, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and every prophet who sincerely submitted to God are understood to have embodied Islam, long before the emergence of the Muslim community as we know it today. This perspective shifts attention away from religious labels and toward shared principles. The emphasis becomes a continuity and synchronicity with Judaism and Christianity rather than separation, remembrance rather than reinvention, and one enduring relationship between God and humanity. When we step back and examine the foundations rather than the differences, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam share an extraordinary amount of common ground. Each teaches belief in one creator. Each values prayer, charity, justice, compassion, family, and personal responsibility. Each looks to prophets as examples of faith and moral character. Each understands existence as meaningful and directed toward accountability before God. There are, of course, differences between these traditions that have created clear tensions and disagreements throughout history and into the modern world. From an Islamic perspective, however, these divisions aren't foundational but reflect human interpretation and handling of revelation rather than the original message. Islam teaches that the same divine guidance has repeatedly been misunderstood, altered, or divided by human beings. To be honest, we can say the same exact thing of Islam itself today. It might have gone through its own progressions of misinterpretation and jurisprudence, where maybe Islam as a faith has been polluted by external human fallibility, where politics, power, and fear have moved it away from its purer message. Recognizing this reminds us to examine our own biases and seek understanding beyond the conflicts created by people. By setting aside political debates and inherited assumptions, it becomes easier to appreciate how closely these traditions are connected. For Muslims, Christians, and Jews alike, many of the same morals, values, and aspirations remain familiar. Perhaps understanding this shared history doesn't erase all disagreement, but it can encourage greater curiosity, deepen respect, and a clearer appreciation of how intertwined these three faiths have and will always be.